which is something I forget. And I'm going to now share my screen so that we can get the meeting started. And we'll do that with the bell.
Hey.
Okay, that brings the meeting to a start. Let's go over now, and we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to, really, we are. There we are. And I'm going to ask Ted to lead us in the pledge. So if you could all stand.
If you can stand where you are for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag.
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
One
nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. You can all be seated. And last but by no means least, the screen going nuts, the four-way test. So Rodney, if you could lead us in the four-way test.
Sure. The four-way test of all the things we think and say and do. First,
Is it the truth?
second,
Is it fair?
fair to all
Concerned.
third,
Will
Build
friendships.
friendships.
fourth,
will it be beneficial
To
all
all concerned.
and most important.
Have
fun.
Have fun.
Oh, come on, one more time.
Have fun.
Thanks, everyone. I still like doing a little bit of silliness there. It's just a fun way to get the meeting started, and I always think the four-way test it's good for us to just remember that. There's Jan. Good morning, Jan.
Morning, Jan.
Hi, Jan.
And Jonathan's here. So yeah.
Morning.
Okay. So we are very lucky today, and again, many thanks to Ron Mabry for setting up this call and a few of the upcoming calls. But we have John Germ here, who is a past RI president, and he also sits on the board of the Rotary Foundation. And the Rotary Foundation is consistently rated as one of the top charities in the world. But I'll let you guys talk about it. So Ron, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce John. I'm going to ask everyone else if you could just mute until and unless you have a question. Thanks.
Thanks, President Rick. Well, when I spoke with John yesterday morning, I asked if there were any specific items he wanted me to include with his introduction, and if not, I would just make stuff up. And John's response to me was, make stuff up. So here we go. It's up to all you all to determine fact from fiction. John is a member of the Rotary Club of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and currently serves as a trustee of the Rotary Foundation with a term that expires in 2022. John is an engineer and served in the U.S. Air Force, where he was selected as one of the original Gemini 7 astronauts, but had to withdraw because he was too tall to fit in the space capsule. John Glenn was then selected to replace John Germ. He joined Rotary in 1976 and has served in numerous positions at all levels of Rotary. I had the good fortune and honor to have John as my RI President's representative at my district conference in Virginia in 2014. And John did such a good job at that assignment, he was immediately selected to be RI President and served in that role in 2016-2017. John has also served as Rotary Foundation Trustee Vice Chair and chaired Rotary's $200 million polio challenge. He was recognized as a champion of change by the White House in 2013. John's wife, Judy, a noted figure skater who has 7 Olympic gold medals to her name, is the honorary pit crew boss of an unnamed NASCAR race team whose owner is a past head coach of the Washington Redskins. And John and Judy are also Arch Clump Society members. So please join me in giving my dear friend John Germ a great big Rotary Club of Poipu Beach.
Aloha.
John,
Well,
it's all
great.
yours.
Thank you, Rod. about half of that's true, I guess, or so. But I did, though. I tell you one thing. I was when I was in the Air Force and had been to Vietnam and came back through Hawaii. My first trip to Hawaii, by the way, was in 1961, and so our plane it was the C-124, Roz, and so it had gotten grounded because we had a crash in Dover, Delaware, that killed a lot of people on C-124. But the long story of that is that I did go from Honolulu. We ended up in Travis Air Force Base. Then we went to St. Louis. And we picked up Gemini 4. So part of that story could be true there, that because we did haul Gemini 4 down to the Cape for launch. So then we found out we had a 6-inch crack in our wing spar. So I thought that was about time for me to say, I need to do engineering work. But good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure for me to be with you. And I know that these are trying times for all of us because of things that are going on. And virtually, we're here today. And actually, I was supposed to be in Hawaii today with my family. So we were coming early to have some free time and to relax and everything. So just get to look at the scenery of your pictures there. So I guess that's as close as I'll get for a while to do that. But let me thank you for the work that the Rotarians there have done to put on a convention. And it's now going to be a virtual convention. So it'll be the world's first ever virtual convention. So you may still make history with the largest number of attendants at a convention. So thank you for what you've done. And I asked the question a while ago about how many shirts you still had left over that you got to sell to do that. And I understand you got about 1,000 of them. Well, I've got about 2,000 ties left over. So I understand what we're both going through right now. So, but thank you for the opportunity. You know, we are certainly, I think, if I could relate to the islands, you're traveling in uncertain territory. You know, you get in your boat, you go out, the wind comes up or the waves come up, or you go out with Claude and you find out that you're supposed to take a nice little cruise. This is a 2004, and you find out that you're the crew. And you find out that the guy that owns this boat that you're on was a former U-2 commander. So, you know, you think of these uncharted waters that we're in, an uncharted territory that we certainly are in right now. So, you know, it'd be awfully easy for us to get discouraged. It would all be, we're disruptive, so we could get discouraged. We're attending probably more Zoom meetings and the things that we would ever thought about in the past. But at the same time, we miss that fellowship where you get together. We miss doing projects where we get together. We heard from a conversation just a few minutes ago about the youth exchange program. Our district has canceled the youth exchange program this year because we can't see how that would actually work. And so we're seeing those things happen all around the world and everything. We see the economy. One day it's up, one day it's down. So we're all in this disruptive stage with it. But I would like to say, as Rotarians, though, we have to be optimistic. We have to look at and take disruption and make it into innovation. We have to think about how can we do things differently. You know, I feel sorry for Mark because one of the president's highlights is to have a convention every year. And obviously, I'm very proud of the convention we had in Atlanta, Georgia. Many of you were there, but you know, I know he was really looking forward to coming to Hawaii, it's like a lot of us were. But all of a sudden, we got to say change. So now we're going to have a virtual convention. How's that going to work? We don't know, but it's going to be something we're trying. Who ever thought about we'd have Zoom meetings before? I've got Zoom district conferences. You know, in 1 week, I have spoken at 5 different countries. And so you stop to think about innovation and what innovation has allowed us to do. Roz don't get on planes anymore. She does her work electronically. I don't get on planes anymore. So, you know, we've had to adjust to the times, and we've had to think about how do we do things. How do we do projects? How do we do community surveys? So we've got to find ways to do that electronically. And I think electronically, our lives have all changed because of what we're able to do. Certainly that when Paul Harris started thinking years ago about doing Rotary, you know, he said, we don't know what Rotary is going to be tomorrow. And I think those words back in 1905 are still true today. We don't know what Rotary is going to be tomorrow, but we've got to be optimistic. We've got to say, yes, we can continue to do what we need to do to improve lives throughout the world. So let us think about that. Let's think about LinkedIn. Let's think about how we have to think out of the box. We can't do things like we used to do. So let's use our imagination and think about how do we do things differently. Paul Harris was a visionary. Paul Harris wanted to have fun, fellowship, based on classification system. So he was a visionary. He thought that what could this organization eventually end up being? You know, Arch Klump, our 6th president, he was a visionary. Arch Klump said we should create an endowment for doing good in the world that started with $26.50 from a convention left over from Kansas City. That's now got almost $2 billion in income and expectancies. So visionaries. I think a great visionary was a guy by the name of Sir Clem Renoff. When he read on the airplane in Time magazine that smallpox had been eradicated, and he called a man named Dr. John Sever, who was one of his governors, and said, is there anything of this magnitude that Rotary could do? Well, Dr. Sever knew Dr. Saban. And they came back and said, yes, there is. We can, in fact, eradicate polio. The world could eradicate polio. What a vision that was, to say that only the second disease ever could ever be eradicated, because if we all work together as a team, because together everyone achieves more. So we had to build a team, unheard of back then. Rotary had never been involved in a global project, but yet they adopted, spent $760,000 health, hunger, and humanity grant, which we no longer have, but $760,000 to do 2 things: provide vaccine and to eradicate polio from the Philippines, to vaccinate over 6 million children in the Philippines. A lot of people said it couldn't be done. Benny Santos, many others, yes, it was accomplished. And because of that accomplishment, Rotary went to the World Health Assembly and said, we've done this. Why don't we join together? And why don't we take this on as an international project? They wouldn't even let Rotary into the room. They would not let the room, and said, we do not work with non-governmental organizations. Your organization is fluid. You got members coming and going. There's no continuity, on and on and on. But you know what? Rotary said, yes, we can. And because Rotary made that commitment, more than 650,000 paralytic cases of polio are prevented every year. 650,000 kids that did not get polio every year. 19 million people who otherwise would be crippled or paralyzed are walking today. And I never will forget when I was in Nigeria and I was putting polio drops in this little child's mouth. A woman came over and handed me her baby. So you squeeze their mouth, just like some of you have done on NIDs. You put them 2 little drops in. You get through. You look at her, she don't speak your language and you don't speak hers, but she smiles. because she knows that you've done something as a Rotarian, not me as an individual, but as a Rotarian, that's going to help her child have a better life. What else could you say about the benefits of that? Or how about the man that lives in Dallas, Texas, that's in an iron lung, been in an iron lung since he was 6 years old? He's a Rotarian. He's a major donor. And I went to visit him. And he said, I wish that the Rotary had been around before I got polio. He's a lawyer. He has a ruler that he puts in his mouth and he flips it up and down, depending on if he's writing or if he's doing work on his computer. He said, you see these collars around my neck? He said, if that collar leaks, I die. He said, you hear that pump? If that pump quits, I die. And I immediately thought of a lady in Jackson, Tennessee, who had died, who was living in an iron lung, but the power went out during a tornado, and she died because they couldn't get there to get the generator started quick enough. Those spare parts, are in Dallas, Texas. So that Rotarian is still there because Rotary got involved, and Rotary said, yes, we're going to make people's lives better. Nearly 3 million children, 3 billion children, we have vaccinated. We have to vaccinate over 400 million children a year. 400 million children a year that we vaccinate. We do surveillance in 72 different countries to be sure that that virus is gone. We spend $850 million a year, $850 million per year in order to reach our goal of eradication of polio. Well, these are different times. COVID has changed a lot of things. COVID has actually interrupted our plans on eradication of polio. So we've had to postpone a lot of the things that we were doing for eradication. For example, the best way, as we know, is you have to put those 2 drops into a child's mouth. That's personal contact. In Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nigeria, you go door to door. You can't do that. You can't do door to door. We don't think about that. When we think about our clubs not meeting, think about trying to reach every one of those children out there in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Nigeria, these remote villages. But we have to do that. You know, can't do it at airports anymore. Nobody's flying, the kids are not there. So we can't even check the visitors that do come in. Or what about the train stations where we used to, in India and other places where we go in there, the train stops at a station and you go in there and you put the drops in the mouth and you paint their little finger purple so that you know that they've had this vaccine. Border crossings. Just think about the people that are migrating back and forth across borders, and we can't stop them. We don't have a way to stop them. But we are still doing a lot of things. You know, COVID and polio are very similar. Stop and think about that. We hate to think about it, but let's think about it. They're both evil viruses. They're both carried human to human. So how has the polio efforts helped with COVID? Very interesting. The infrastructure that Rotary helped build through our laboratories, we're providing surveillance. We're using some of our carriers in order to carry stool samples to take back to these labs to check for COVID to see where it may be isolated at. We did this for Ebola. We did it for the Asian flu. We did it for yellow fever. So our infrastructure that we started with partners have really helped with that. We're setting up monitoring operations. We've done vaccine cures, as I said. We've done posters to talk about washing your hands and proper sanitation and hygiene. In India, they came up with, to try to teach the kids how to do this, they came up with a song that's called Wishy, 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 Washy, Washy, Washy. And the little kids learn to sing that. And that way they know that how long they have to sing that through 5 times, and they know they've had enough time to wash their hands. So think about the fact that that vision has expanded into even working on the goals of today to help with COVID. We're providing face masks, we're providing shields, we're providing food service, a lot of those things. TRF, the foundation, your foundation, has approved 166 global grants and 161 district grants, and we have spent over $19 million to assist with COVID, not counting what we do through WHO, CDC, UNICEF. But while we've done all of that, let's don't forget our #1 priority program. Roz has got it behind her screen. End polio now. I want to end polio, I think, is what her thing is. So we've got to continue that. And we've got to remember that while we were rejected after the Philippines, we didn't give up. We said we would raise $120 million. Rotarians raised $247 million. Went back to WHO and World Health Alliance, and they said, yes, okay, you've got a plan, you've shown you can do it, so let's create this partnership. So remember that it was Rotary that started this back in the Philippines in 1979. And let's remember that it was Rotary that got turned down but didn't give up. It was Rotary that went back and said, okay, we'll show you we can raise the money. We'll show you that we're determined to eradicate polio. It was then that WHO, CDC, and UNICEF partnered to create this thing called the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. So Rotary has the history. Rotary has the emphasis to continue with this program regardless of what has happened in between time with COVID or anything else. Well, along came a man in 2007, in November 2007, Rotary entered into an agreement with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. November 2007, there was $100 million, $100 million that was transferred into the bank account of the Rotary Foundation. 2 stipulations. Remember November 2007. First stipulation was that we must spend that $100 million by December the 31st of 2008. Second, by December of 2010, we needed to raise $100 million. We didn't have a campaign. We didn't have a committee or anything until January of 2008. From the International Assembly in 2008, I was asked to be the chair of this committee. Well, I believe in Rotarians. And I believe that Rotarians had made a commitment in '79. I believe that Rotarians made a commitment in 1985 to '88. And I believe Rotarians have still got that commitment today. So we said, yes, we can raise $100 million. We were about halfway through when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation came back and said, we will give you another $150 million if you raise another 100. So I was asked by the chairman of the foundation at that time, and I was asked by the staff man, John Austin, and said, well, what are you going to do? I said, hell, I ain't going to tell him no. We're going to do it. Thanks to you, And Rotarians around the world, we raised 228.7. I was with Bill Gates in New York for one of his annual meetings, and I asked him, I said, Bill, why did you give that money to Rotary? You could have given it to WHO, you could have given it to CDC, you could have given it to UNICEF. Why did you choose Rotary? And he said, Rotary has the passion. Rotary has the desire. Rotary has the commitment. Rotary has boots on the ground. More importantly, Rotary has a surveillance system to be sure that this money is spent effectively and efficiently. Now, here's a man that's got more money than 8 countries in the entire world. 8 countries. That he had faith in Rotary, and that he gave us the money in advance. Gave us 3 years to raise the money, but he wanted us to spend it in 1 year. Well, we spent the money, we couldn't give it back. He had that kind of faith in Rotary because he knows that Rotarians keep their word. Well, we did that campaign. We've done others campaigns. We now have a commitment from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that says, if we do $50 million a year, he will give us $100 million a year. We've got that agreement through 2023. We just extended it for 3 more years. He still has faith. But I wonder sometimes about Rotarians, because there's only 9% of Rotarians in the world, 9% that are recorded as having given any money to the polio campaign this past year. Only 47% of the clubs. And I think that's all our individual faults, because we gain 100,000 members a year, we lose 100,000 members a year. We're not telling our story. We don't tell people how Rotary got involved with polio. We got to remember there's a lot of people that's in Rotary right now that have never heard of polio. They don't know anything about it. It's not in their vocabulary because they don't see it in their neighborhoods. They don't know that you can't go outside and play with the kids. You can't go to the local swimming hole to swim and have fun during the summertime because of that devastation thing called polio that you're going to get crippled. You know, I can remember very well when we couldn't go out and play and we couldn't do these things. While there's similarities with COVID and with polio, there's one big difference. We have the vaccine. We have a vaccine to eradicate polio. We do not have one, and personally, I don't believe we're going to have one for another year or so for COVID. It's just not going to happen. And it shouldn't happen until we know that it's safe. But the 2 vaccines we have, the oral polio vaccine and the IPV, we know work. Countries are now switching from the OPV to the IPV. And Dr. Salk was correct when he said, you'll never eradicate polio without my vaccine. Saban was right that we could never eradicate it without his vaccine. We would have never been able to visit all these countries, all these remote villages, going door to door, unless we had a vaccine that volunteers could distribute. So we had to do that. The Salk vaccine is a kill vaccine. So yes, we've got to start getting that. And we now have started, a lot of countries, 115 different countries now, are using the kill vaccine. I think it's 115 they're using. So I will read you a quote from Bill Gates. And you can relate this to any type of a disaster or anything that you have in any country. Quote, fighting a disease is like fighting fire. It's not enough to put out most of it. You have to get it all. Rotary's generous pledge to the Global Polio Eradication Initiative will help us extinguish this terrible disease for good, end quote. Bill Gates, Atlanta, 2017. What are we going to do? We promised the children that we would eradicate polio. There is no reason for any child today to get polio because we know how to do it and we can continue to do it. Someone gave each of us an opportunity to become a servant for humanity, to be involved with an organization called Rotary. We need to repay that opportunity with an obligation to invite other people to our organization. We need to put our Rotarians to work. We need to get them involved. You've probably increased your involvement in Rotary tenfold just because of working together to put a convention on. It's a lot of work. People that attend enjoy it. They don't understand what it took to get there. People don't know what Rotary has done in order to protect their children. And we have to continue to do that. So let's set some goals. Let's retain our membership. Let's reach out and invite someone else to join. But let's keep our promise to the children of the world. Let us eradicate polio. We can do it. We will do it. So thank you for letting me be with you. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you've got. I will not tell you about my adventure in space because that would be a fabrication. So, and I don't know about Judy's working on cars either. So that's kind of unique for her. So, but thank you very much. And again, let me thank you for all the work that you've done for a convention that will take place, but it's just going to take place virtually. So thank you, Ron.
Thanks, John. Appreciate your comments and appreciate your time this morning.
Any questions? Do feel free to unmute yourself.
So you were a U-2 pilot?
I was a C-124 navigator.
Oh, okay.
Once the pilot got about 100 miles offshore, he was at my mercy.
You tell him where to go.
Yeah, do you know that there used to be a boat out in the middle of the Pacific out there that was halfway between California and Honolulu? It was called Ocean Station November. And that's their whole purpose in life was to help guide you to get there, because that's the farthest point from land you'll ever be. You didn't know that fact, did you?
I thought it was Hawaii.
Jan, go for it.
Hi, John. Thank you so much for being with us today, and aloha from Kauai. I just have a question about the immunization when people go out and give the vaccines and stuff. One, is that still going on? And two, how is their safety guaranteed?
There's two parts to that question. Number one is on hold right now, because the only time you're getting the vaccine is if it's a newborn child in a hospital. And yes, they are still be given vaccine there. The routine immunizations that people get still has the polio vaccine in it, so they're getting that. So it's just not, in many cases, it's not thorough. Number two, as far as protection is concerned, since we're not going door to door, we don't have to worry about the mask or anything like that right now. But when they do have these NIDs and sub-NIDs in Afghanistan and Pakistan right now, they are being protected by military or police. We have had over 100 vaccinators that have been killed. I will also say, though, that we are down from 125 countries and 1,000 cases a day. Right now, we've only got 60 cases in Afghanistan and Pakistan combined. Nigeria hasn't had a case since August of 2016. They probably would have already been declared polio-free, except for the fact that the epidemiologists have not been able to go into all the different countries in Africa to ensure that their surveillance is still good and their records are correct and everything. But once Nigeria is declared polio-free, the entire continent of Africa will be declared polio-free, and we believe that that's actually going to happen this year. Hope that answers your question. Yes, sir. Go
Got a
ahead.
question.
Yeah.
So your projections or Rotary's projections with this hiatus of no NIDs due to COVID, do you see a certain number you project of rising cases?
Well, we're still less cases than there were last year at this same period of time. Countries are now being, the World Health Organization is now coming back and saying, okay, let's start planning. So they are planning for reopening up. So I would think that probably July or August, most of these countries will be back open for going door to door and everything. And as a matter of fact, the Taliban asked us to help provide them some food and equipment and supplies in Afghanistan because so they know that we've got to get in there to protect those kids. So I think that they're going to go back open up pretty quickly. But we are still less now. Last year, about this same time, we almost had 250 cases, I think it was, and so we only got 60 right now.
John, what countries, obviously Afghanistan and Pakistan still have cases, but what countries are they looking at for NIDs?
Oh, we still do NIDs in India. We still do NIDs in Ethiopia. We still do NIDs all over the world. As a matter of fact, we just got through doing one not too long ago in the Philippines and everything, because we do have that vaccine-derived polio, so we still have to do that. And that's why people say, well, why are you spending $850 million? Well, we have to vaccinate, like I said, 400 million kids a year until we don't have any more polio. We still give, in Hawaii, you still get polio vaccinations. Your new child gets polio vaccination right now. And you hadn't had a case since the 70s. So we still spend an awful lot of money, not just what Rotary, WHO, and CDC are doing. Just think about what individual countries are doing also. So, but yes, we are still doing those, and we will continue to do those until there's no more polio.
What do you think the difference is between smallpox eradication and polio? Because polio seems to always have a little bit here, and it's so hard. But smallpox was eradicated rather, faster, I think, or something like that. I don't know. Maybe.
Well, it was eradicated quicker. But think about how much smaller the world was, not physically, but people-wise back then too. Think about the people right now that don't even believe in vaccinations. And you've got a lot of those people that say, oh, we don't need to do vaccinations. We're okay. Don't worry about it. We don't have these viruses around here. And guess what? Think about what happened in California. I guess it was maybe 3 years ago when there's a big outbreak of measles, came in from overseas. So I tell everybody, polio's a plane ride away. And probably the smartest thing that Hawaii did is make everybody go into quarantine for 14 days if you came in. Don't even take a chance. We can't do that anymore. So it's just going to take us hard work, and that's why the boots on the ground is very important. We will get there.
John, I have a question about your trees. So you planted 1 million trees in your year, and is that?
I think that was Ian Risley that planted those trees.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, but we planted a lot of trees during my year too, that all around the world. And I think you're going to see Rotary plant a lot more trees. And you look at all the tornadoes, the fires, the lava, the volcano eruptions that destroys what God put down here. God's destroying that with all these other things, but Rotary, I think, is going to help replenish a lot of that. I will tell you, one of the things that's coming up at our trustee meeting is whether or not we want to include the environment as one of the 6 areas of focus, or we want to do environment as a separate area of focus. So that's going to be a good discussion. The committee has a recommendation, which I can't say what is, but I think you're going to see more emphasis on that.
Thank you.
So vaccination's always first line of defense for polio, but transmission is poor sanitation. So are any of your funds directed to sewage control and sanitation?
Not to actually build plants, but we do have a lot of money that, not through polio, but through our global grants and other, through the Rotary Foundation for water and sanitation projects. And we do have a water and sanitation, we call it wash rag. And one of the things we have spent some money on during this COVID situation is billboards and things about the proper way to wash your hands. You know, the first time I saw one of these, I call them troughs, but big long troughs where spigots out there and people are washing their hands. And I said, well, that's all well and good. Where do they dry their hands? And they were drying them on their clothes. Well, that really don't solve the problem. So there's a lot of education that has to be done. But yes, we are spending some money. And we did spend a little polio money this time in Pakistan and Afghanistan about how you wash your hands and how to properly go to the bathroom. We have helped pay for grants to build toilets in some of these countries because girls quit going to school when they were about 10 years old because they didn't have separate bathrooms. So we've done some of those things. So yes, we are big into water and sanitation projects.
Hey, John, I have a question.
Yes.
Has there ever been any discussion about including eradicating polio as one of the areas of focus?
Not as a specific area of focus, and the reason being is that polio is the #1 priority program as determined by the board, the trustees, and the council on legislation. So it actually fits into all areas of things, but we're kind of running it as a separate thing through the International Polio Plus Committee, and the Countdown to History Committee is running the different programs, because our basic job right now is to raise this money. And by the way, our money, a lot of all of our $150 million, and that's another beautiful thing about Gates. When they gave us the $100 million, there's no strings attached to how we spend it, except for expending it on polio, eradication of polio. So our money was basically going to, we still do some research, but we do WHO and UNICEF. And at our coming trustee meeting, or IPPC meeting, which is on June the 5th, virtually, and then our trustee meeting, which is June the 15th, I believe it is, we will be spending some money on vaccination. We're spending about $12 million actually buying vaccine for a stockpile on vaccines. So, but not to make it a separate area. We think we are a separate area.
I have a question about the vaccine, John. Are we still giving the drops, or are we moving to shots?
No, Rotary, we're still doing the drops. We still have to continue doing those drops until all the countries switch over. And so they're slowly switching over. And if you can imagine trying to train people to give shots, I don't know that anybody want me to give them a shot, but, probably would. But yes, we are still giving the drops.
Thank you.
And that's the vaccine we're buying, because if there's an outbreak of any kind, we have to be able to go in there quickly. There's 3 types of polio: type 1, 2, and 3. And type 2 and 3 are gone. But we still have some vaccine-derived polio that's not as bad as as the wild virus. So we still have to go in there. And if there is an outbreak of any kind, there's an outbreak response team that actually goes in and what we call mop up. They surround that total area and to give a vaccine again. And you take places like India, for example, where you got Afghanistan and Pakistan on their borders, and those borders are very porous. And so we have to constantly worry about migrant workers back and forth and everything. Just give you an example that relates to COVID. Our county only had 40, well, too many, but 40, this one area in one city not too far from me only had 24 cases of COVID. The next week, they had 200 cases because it's a big farming area and migrant workers came in and they all live close together. They're all confined. So it spread like wildfire. That's what would happen with polio coming back into India. So that's why we have to continue to do that.
Ron, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you want to tell us about your I Heart Rotary glasses and your Polio Plus funding from that?
Well, so far over the last year, year and a half with the I Love Rotary glasses, and with those glasses, if you donate $1,000 to polio and let me know, I'll send you a pair of those glasses and you become part of the Paul Harris family. And if you don't donate $1,000, but if you donate $20 and there is someone near you, actually, you get your picture taken with the glasses on and with a promise that you're going to donate $20 to the polio program. So over the last probably year, year and a half, I've gotten about 23 to 24 people that have spent the $1,000 to get the glasses. So it's kind of on a little bit of a hiatus at this point, but I'm going to try to bring that back up again and start getting people to think of donating to polio, but also let people know that if someone around you has a pair of those glasses and is a member of the Paul Harris Ohana, then go up to them and say, I want my picture taken and donate $20 to polio.
Ron, I think that's a great program. Excuse me. I recall last year at the convention in Hamburg, it was a very easy thing to get people to just go over and get their photo taken and get the pledge from them that they would donate the $20. So thank you for your efforts on that. That's been really a great way of raising some funds and having it just be fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to do that when we're all together physically. So, you know, whenever I was at a meeting, I would have the glasses with me or I'd put them on and people would ask about them. I'd tell them about what I was trying to do to raise money for polio. And I said, if you donate $20 to polio, I had an extra pair of glasses, put them on. We both get our pictures taken, we publish it, and I showcase them doing their part to eradicate polio. So I think once we're all able to get back together physically and we're getting out to meetings and getting around people, then I'll certainly bring that back out and start a little more active with that.
I don't know if you can see this or not, but here's an idea that a group up in New England area came up with. Says, take out polio, and it's a sack with in polio now on it, and you donate your lunch money, and they're going to have a speaker and have a program to do that. And then they got a set price. And then in Australia and New Zealand, they've got one that's got your own menu to it. So you can pay $10, $20, $50 or whatever. So there's a lot of people coming up with these new ideas that out there to raise funds for polio. So we are at about 38 million of our 50 million right now. So we're going to get there.
John, you know, one of the, oh, sorry, Anna, go ahead. Go for it. Go.
This is a thing. Thank you, Rick, and thank you, John, for being here. This is just a piggyback on what Rotarian Craig was speaking on sanitation. It's a very good point. And since $100 million is such a huge amount of money where so much can be accomplished, is it possible to make the argument to use part of the funding for providing infrastructure in the high density areas in India and Africa where diseases such as polio run rampant due to lack of proper infrastructure to provide this sanitation and hygiene to keep it, yes.
There's a lot of that going on, just not through the polio effort itself, which is doing grants and district grants. Gates is putting in money, UNICEF is putting in money. Rotary works through the clubs and the districts to do that, but it doesn't detract from what our part for the eradicating polio is. We know we have to have clean sanitation, proper clean water in order to do it. But yeah, we spent a lot of money in Haiti, for example, which is a very dense populated area. India is very dense. Beirut, Lebanon, I've been there. That's very dense. So we're spending a lot of money there. Yeah.
So John, we had another John speak to our club also arranged through Ron, John Nani, who is a polio survivor.
He's a polio survivor, right.
Yeah. And one of the things he talked about that I think was very striking to me was what he's dealing with now. I mean, he had polio in the 50s, and right now he's dealing with post-polio syndrome. Right. And the one thing that I think is getting lost with COVID-19 is I think there are a lot of people out there who are being very cavalier about, if I get it, I'll get over it, it'll be fine. Well, we don't know what's going to happen with it in 50, 60 years. And we may see a post-COVID syndrome as well. So I think it's an interesting one because drawing the parallels and seeing the similarities are huge between polio and COVID-19. And lessons learned. We thought with polio when you kind of recovered from it that it was all done, but clearly it wasn't. We're already hearing about some people with COVID that still have breathing problems and such.
Yeah.
And
well, in
thing.
some cases, you take a person like Jack Nicklaus. Jack Nicklaus had polio. His sister had polio, and they've had no after effects so far. There's a lady in Atlanta. Her husband was given about a little over $1 million a year to eradicate polio through Rotary. She had all of a sudden she started losing muscle strength, so she had post-polio syndrome, and then she eventually died. So yes, there's the different levels of effect. My father had polio, and he had one leg that was a little bit smaller than the other one, his lower leg, but he still worked and still had life. So he was determined. His doctor told him he wasn't ever going to walk again, and but he did. And so a lot of it's determination. But yes, the post-polio syndrome, and we're going to have a lot more of that too. There will be a lot more, and there's nothing we can do about it. There's no medicine or anything for that. So we don't know what's going to happen with COVID. We don't know. We actually, tell you the truth, we don't know how many people died from pneumonia that they now saying is COVID. So there's a lot of that going on too.
All righty. Any other questions from anyone?
John, thank you for being with us today.
It's my pleasure.
Ted, you froze.
I think we got interrupted somehow or another.
Can you hear me?
Can now.
Yes.
Yeah. A recent poll, 50% of the people in our
Judy,
country.
Please.
I'm sorry.
Give my best to Judy when you get back.
Okay.
Or when you get in the other room.
Yeah. Thank you, Will Club.
Ted, you had something?
John, I was just going to ask your thoughts. A recent poll I saw in the US said that 50% of people said that they would not take a COVID-19 vaccination, which is kind of mind-boggling. And of course, we have the ongoing anti-vax movement. Do you see Rotary playing a bigger role in educating people and on the need for vaccinations beyond polio?
I think that Rotary's doing that now to a degree. And I think you're going to see WHO and CDC. There's a recent article that came out about how the fact that people are not being vaccinated now is going to bring back polio and tuberculosis. So I think you're going to see a lot of pressure from the government. But, you know, when you have people like Robert Kennedy, the Kennedy name has a lot of impact to it. When he's one of the biggest anti-vaccinators there are out there, and now you've got all this innuendos against the Gates Foundation about they're doing it for personal gain and this, that, and the other. Well, ain't nothing to that. That's just, you can go to that fact check thing and find out that none of that stuff is true. But you do have the anti-vaccinators out there doing it. And you've got young mothers that do not believe that they ought to vaccinate their children. And my daughter, latest daughter-in-law, she has 2 little boys now, but one's 5 and one is 2. And she said when Franklin was born, 5 years, she says, should I get him vaccinated? I said, if you want to stay in this family, you will. So, you know, we've got to take hard stands. So we're going to have to pressure people, yes. Now, what Rotary's role is going to be, I think they'll mix it in. I don't think they'll adopt anything like COVID. We don't even know what that vaccine is. Is it going to be a pill? Is it going to be a shot? You know, I get a flu shot every year. You know, I get a pneumonia shot every year. So we're making it easy to get, but education is the important part. We've got to convince people that vaccinations are necessary, and you're not going to get autism from having a vaccination.
I do think if Rotary is successful in eradicating polio, that becomes a big news story. And so that then also furthers the idea that vaccines work. So right. I think that's a good avenue for us to be pursuing. Absolutely.
Well, when you say that 19 million people are now walking that otherwise would not, that tells you a little bit about vaccinations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, John, thank you so much for joining us. We very much enjoyed this. And I am going to encourage everyone on the call to go out to Rotary.org and make a donation to Polio Plus. Because one of the things I think that happens at the international conventions, and I'm looking forward to it happening at the virtual one, is you get fired up about Rotary again. So let's all take this fire and let's do something with it. And with this fire, let's burn down polio. I don't know, that analogy kept going. But yeah, I think this is a good time to go ahead and do that. So thank you again, John. And I think if we make those donations, that honors the time that John got to spend with us.
Thank you, John. Good seeing you again.
Thank you, John. Thanks. Good to see you, Ron. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Aloha, everyone. Join us again next week. Mark Maloney. Thanks so much, everyone.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Thank you. Have a great day.
See you in 2 weeks, John.